Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, the Catalyzr Quotient, the one number you need to know for talent. Today, we're going to talk about the Catalyzr Quotient, a new predictive metric that provides insight into potential. Today, I have joining me my fellow co-founder, Trevor Higgs, and our guest and advisor, Jim Griffin. Hello, Jim. Hello, Trevor.
Good to be here.
Yep, great to be here too, guys. Thank you.
I'd like to start just with a little bit of background, and then we'll get into the webinar. As I said, my name is Jeremy Bargiel. I worked for a number of years at Accenture Strategy before joining TCT Consulting, which is an implementation company focused on compensation software. Trevor?
I'm Trevor Higgs. My background is in HR and HR tech organizations. I started off in HRIT in investment banking, where I was head of HR technology at Credit Suisse. Then I moved over to Accenture and worked in Accenture Strategy Group. That's where I met Jim and where I met Jeremy. And then after that, I went to Johnson & Johnson, where I was a global head of candidate experience. Later, when Jeremy and I were at TCT, over COVID, we had this conversation around the things that we had seen in talent when we were consulting. And we had this idea that we're going to talk about today, creating a unified language and metric around how we predict potential and how that's used by human resources. So super excited to be talking with you today. Jim, you want to give a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Trevor and Jeremy. So Jim Griffin, very excited to be here today, very passionate about the Catalyzr solution. My background is 30 plus years in HR technology, spanning global roles for sales leadership and partner leadership. And I founded a company called where we're focused specifically on helping organizations navigate the partnering journey so that they can optimize their outcomes and working with different partnerships and accelerating their revenue journey for greater success and competitive capability. So great to be here.
Yep. So just a little bit of getting little ticks and ties out of the way. As we progress, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section. We will keep monitoring that. And then after we get done, we'll go through here. We're going to talk just a slide or two around the topic today. And then we'll do a very quick demo for you of what Catalyzr does and how the Catalyzr or the Career Quotient ties things together. And then we're just going to have an open conversation. We'll open up to everybody. People can ask questions and we can have a discussion. With that, let's move forward. Jeremy.
Sure. So to ground ourselves, let's take a look at HR systems and processes. As the slide talks about, performance evaluations are tied to KPIs and to reaching specific goals. So these are quantifiable solutions. Potential, on the other hand, lacks any sort of measurable or quantifiable metric.
Yeah, this is huge, Jeremy, because all of the primary systems that customers invest in, whether that be SuccessFactors, Workday, Oracle, or in the likes of ADP, Cornerstone on Demand, they all have these platforms. Everyone's familiar with skills, but when you look at career assessment, so to speak, you evaluate performance by potential. Only one of those things is defensible and quantifiable, and that's performance management. Very mature. It's surprising that potential has never really been quantified. And it ends up just being a group of opinions at best on what is the potential of this individual for any given role. And if you look at all of these primary systems I alluded to a moment ago, they all measure this, but the performance element is the only thing defensible. Potential is a checkbox. Yes or no that this individual has potential in this role. And it's usually just one role. And that's why I think Catalyzr is so game-changing in this topic, this subject matter.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim. So just to touch on that, it's not only it's not defensible, but it's not actionable the way that it's currently set up with these bigger systems.
The real reason for that is because every HR process has its own language and methodology around defining potential, what it is. And there's been no one Rosetta Stone is the insight that we had. When you look at recruiting, they're talking about they're a great fit or they're a high potential candidate. In learning, they say high potential for upskilling or reskilling. When you see careers, oh, there's a potential for lateral moves. And succession is my favorite, which is like ready now, ready in 1 to 2 years, ready in 3 to 5 years. And that was where we had the talent calibration box, where those conversations that I've been in, where managers say, oh, this person's high potential. And then I have HR jumping in and being like, that guy was on a performance improvement plan last year. You're new. There's no real communication because we don't have a common language and definition of what potential is. It's super damaging.
As Trevor mentioned, each of these processes has their own language, but we know that they're not successful. Recruiting and leadership development have their own definitions of potential and success. But as we can see, evaluating years of experience or even skills results in 38% of hires leaving within 12 months. If we look at leadership development, which has a talent identification problem, 72% of the time, managers are the only people who are looking at these people and making recommendations, which obviously is rife with bias. So really what we're looking at is the root cause is really in the selection process.
And how we're identifying potential. And that's the reason why we created Catalyzr. Because what we do is we want to quantify an individual's potential for job success. We want to do it not just for one job, but for every job, for every person. And we present it as this career quotient, which is an easy to understand metric that will help create that common language. So what I'd like to do is stop the presentation and show you guys the system. HR spends a huge amount of time and effort trying to get the right people in the right roles at the right times. What makes Catalyzr different is the ability to calculate an individual's potential for success within a role, and then not only for that one role, but for all roles. And we do it at scale and without bias. And as I said before, we're presenting it as this career quotient. And it provides a common definition of potential across every HR process. And what I'll show you here in Catalyzr is how it creates immediately actionable insight and intelligence to help you put those people in the right place at the right time. I want to cover 3 scenarios today. The first is an internal mobility scenario, but it also works just as well for recruiting. And if we look at the x-axis, you see we bring in our clients' quantified performance ratings, and we have our calculations of the career quotient. And what I want to show is if we look at an investment analyst role, what you're going to see when you get to this screen is, this is a list of all the people who are in that role by their CQs and by their performance. So we have performance by potential with a quantified potential. And then what you'll see is one of the things about the career quotient is that you can aggregate it together at a role level. So for investment analysts, or you can bring it together for the investment group, or you could do it at a company level. And what that does is it gives you an idea of how well you've aligned your employees' potential with the roles that they're in. So it gets to be a very good metric that you can see from the top level all the way down to the individual level. So when we look at this, you can see that there's the whole bank, there's broker dealer, front office, lines of trading. Overall, the career quotient is at 57 for all the employees in their group. If we look at the investment analysts, you'll see here, you have an average of 59. Your exemplars, which I'll talk about in a second, are an 89. What does that mean? What it means, and that kind of gets to what's an exemplar, right? What exemplars are the people who are the best in that role. So one of the things when I was at Johnson, I got to hear a lot from hiring managers was I'd say, hey, what's your job requirements? What's your job description? And they'd go, I don't have a job description. I have Mary, and I want you to clone Mary or find me 5 more Marys. And we were like, okay, cloning's tough. But we took that and we said, okay, what's that idea? The idea is that we have the best person in that role for that company, and allows us to be super personalized about what's successful at that company and how do we try to replicate it. So here, what we call exemplars are really the people that have been identified as the best in that role. And we go through, we use a series of cognitive assessments to create this fingerprint of success, and that we match people to. And then we say, we have incumbents. What are they? They're the people who are currently in that role. And you can see from there, okay, above a 70 is high potential. So you have a number of people who are in that role that are high potential. And you have those that are good. And then you have those who I wouldn't recommend the role to. But what you really care about from an internal mobility perspective is potentials. because we quantify for every person, every role, their potential to do well in, you can go and see across the entire company who actually matches, who could be a fantastic and is high potential for that role within your company. So in this case, that Jocelyn is a great fit. You can see that her current role, CQ, because we have this consistent language, we have a language that you can use across everything. Not only can I see it for internal mobility to talk about her potential for what she could do, now we can see what's her potential for what she's doing currently. And when we look at it in those details, you can see that in the way of ranking, it would be like her number 48th career to do it. This is her number one. She's a fantastic, high potential fit to it. And if you look at the average CQ of the group, she would actually bring a lot to that group in the way of improving the potential, which is super critical. Also, we can see where they have skills. We have a skills ontology that we've brought in, that we've partnered up with Lightcast. We bring that data in and people self-assess their skills. So we have an idea of where they are. So what you'd see from here is that this would be a great potential career for her for internal mobility, and that the way HR could reach out is they could recommend it to her, and then she would receive a message saying, hey, HR sent you a message. We think you'd be really good at this. Are you interested? Now, she might not have all the skills they need for that role. She could train into them over time. We'll talk about that. Any Jeremy, anything you want to add on that one?
No, I will add, companies spend an extraordinary amount of time, money, and development in ensuring they have, you mentioned this earlier, Trev, the right person in the right role at the right time, and more importantly, aligned to the right things. What they haven't had is predictability or a predilection towards this individual will be successful, not just in one role, but every role. It's extraordinary. So you haven't just defined quantified potential. You have done this at scale and without bias for every person, whether they're a prospect or an existing employee, and for all roles simultaneously. Nothing like that's ever happened before. And when you start juxtaposing the level of investments that companies make into these platforms, whether it's success factors, whether it's Workday, Oracle, the whole objective is to get that right person and invest in them so that they are preeminently successful. But they've never had the ability or the actionable insight of investing into Jocelyn, for instance, because they know she has a great degree of aptitude or potential for a certain role. As you're doing final decisions, having the understanding of potential for success in that role, as well as are they ready from a skills standpoint? Skills only gives you readiness. It doesn't tell you that you'll actually be really effective in the role.
All right. Thank you, Jim. The other thing I'd like to talk to you a little bit about is if we look at that's from a career perspective or a job perspective, we also have a filter that says, show us your people, right? So these are all the people who are in the sales and trading organization. And what you'll see is that we would expect people who are high potential to also be high performance. So they'd be up in this well-aligned category. We would expect, when we see people who are high potential above that golden line of 70, by the way, 50 to 70 is good, 70 and above is high potential. What we'd have is we'd have Anita, and we'd say, oh, her performance is only in the mid-range, 5. We know she's high potential. HRBP can have a real conversation with a manager around performance to say, what do we need to do to support her in order to get her to be high performing? So that's another advantage of being able to have a common understanding of potential and say, this is where we expect them to be for this role. What do we need to do to get them there? Now, you will have people who are in a role who might not be in the right place. So that's where we have this kind of realign people who are not performing real well, who aren't high potential for the role, or even above 50 and good for the role. So if we looked at like Jordan, okay, her CQ, she is not well aligned. I would not recommend her being like in this line of business. But we invest a lot in our people. We have, she has a bunch of institutional knowledge. We've invested a lot of time and money. And rather than just saying, oh, bottom performer, we don't need her, what we can do is we can help her with the career development conversation. So you can see that she's got skills that she's filled out. This is not the best role in the organization for, but ones that are better is quality assurance or audit or corporate governance, those areas where that's where her fit is better and focus in it. And one of the great things here is by quality assurance, if we look at it and we look at the details around that for her, right, we can see that org only has a 69 overall. She could be bringing something to that to be a leader, to do really well in that organization if we just train her into that. And through doing that, we can take our bottom performers and try to coach them into top performers. And when we're looking at our spend around skills, which I'll show you next, you're going to be investing in upskilling or reskilling somebody into a position based not on we think they'd be good at this, but based on, I want to spend my money in the most effective way possible. I'm going to spend it reskilling somebody into a role where they are high potential to succeed. So that is the story about helping people with their careers and reskilling. And then last, we have tied into skills. So if I look at it, we have a skill ontology, which we can drive into. And when we look at these are the skills that we show down here are tied to the people and the jobs we have up there. In our system, every skill is tied to a role, and it has a level of importance and a level of criticality to it. So a level that you need to understand it by and how critical it is to the role. So if I looked at the skill finance, and then I was looking at general finance right there, right? And we said, oh, we have investments, financial services. You can go down and say, these are all the people, this is the roles that need an investment skill. These are where we have people who either it's a skill importance and they haven't responded yet, or they're advanced, which is great. But for people who are intermediate or novice, based on how their career quotient is, you'll want to push trainings to these employees that will help them get up to speed. So you can give really personalized training recommendations to individuals to help them either grow in the role they're in or grow in the role where they're going to have the most possible success. That's how we can use the career quotient to support internal mobility, career development, even succession planning. You could use this for high potential leadership. You can model your best leaders and then see which among your organizations have a career quotient that's very high compared to those leaders. And those are the people that you'd select for your leadership development programs. So you have one number that's creating a common language across all of talent for defining potential and getting everybody organized in the right way. So that's the Catalyzr demo.
But Trev, I wanted to add one thing to this. It's when you look at these systems, you often look at is my career being done to me, or do I own my own career? The beauty of the career quotient with Catalyzr is, as an individual, I have the same data at my disposal. I can see that I've got a high disposition of being successful at a certain role, and simultaneously see from a skills perspective, I can put myself on a self-driven course to learn and mitigate the gaps so that I'm ready for that role that has great interest to me. And the potential scoring tells me that I would be quite good at it. And that's a great way to vie for career and aspirational objectives that align towards the total insights that Catalyzr brings to the equation, both top down from a succession planning perspective and bottom up from an employee development, talent laddering perspective.
Thanks, Jim. The last thing is we actually look at ourselves as making other systems stronger by integrating seamlessly into them. So what we can do is we can pass all of our Catalyzr information, all of the career quotient information, we can pass those into systems, and through a couple configuration changes, we can show that information. So this right now is in Success Factors. This is an talent profile and Employee Central. This is actual Catalyzr data that we've configured into this screen to have it work. So we can set up the feeds that run this through so that you can understand where your career quotient is. Or if you were looking at the recruiting module, after your applicants have come in, we can say, this is the career quotient for the people that you have. And you want to go and talk to these, the people with the 83s, the 76s, and 72s first, because they have the highest potential to succeed. So that's what we're doing. We can do this with SuccessFactors. We can do it with Workday, Oracle, name the system, as long as we have the ability to bring in the information and they can tell us where to put it. We can bring that in there and we can make it seamless so that HR doesn't have to go outside to like our platform. It can stay within their own platform and have it be seamless to them. Employees can have it be seamless to them. Because that's one of the things I hated when I was in HRIT. We would be implementing something and be like, oh, we have to click here to go out to a third party, then we come back to finish our process. We can bring it all into one system if you have an organization that wants to invest in making their own processes better.
Gold Medal Environmental is a waste management company on the East Coast, and we ran a pilot with them, a recruiting pilot. And what we ended up doing, as you can see, there's a 70% reduction in hiring time. We had set up this pilot. It took us 4 days to go from kickoff to go live. And then from that point, as Trevor illustrated in that previous slide, they were able to prioritize their interviews based on the CQs. They narrowed it to the top 5 CQs and they made their hiring decision and hired somebody who was a member who had that one of the top 5 CQs. Like many companies, they have a small HR staff, but they were able to reduce their time by 70%. Now they are going to fold recruiting module across all of their recruiting platform. And they are looking into also deploying that across the talent management of the company, as Trevor had illustrated during the demo, the power of having a CQ for everybody within the company to really know the potential and to put people in the right place at the right time to align to their needs, as Jim said, and the business needs of the organization.
All right. So that brings us to questions and a conversation. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And then I'm going to try to figure out how to allow everyone to talk. So a question from Greg: how many job types in GME are we leveraging Catalyzr for? So we started with sales, and we're going to roll that down into all the other ones like HR. We're actually going to use it for drivers as well. So we're going to use it across literally like HR, finance, sales, field workers, all those things. So we're going to use it for everybody. And what we do is we model up their best. And from there, we create their profiles of success. And then as candidates come through, we run them through that.
Well, that's super significant because it's differential because this is viable not just for desktop workers, but deskless for frontline workers. The fact that it's super plug and play for drivers is amazing because that's rare to do that. It's much harder to do that, say, on skills. Certainly you need to be skilled and you have to meet the compliance and regulatory requirements of being capable of driving, especially if it's certification in a truck. But having the predilection to success or predictivity of who's going to be very effective at this, that's awesome.
Yeah. You guys can unmute yourselves and just ask questions at this point. There you go, Greg.
I want to hog the floor. Run through again, please, how the model is created for that profile we're seeking to duplicate.
Sure. So what we do is we have a series of assessments that we use. So we do use assessments, and what we do is we ask the company to identify their best people in a role. And then we run them through the same assessments. And then our AI algorithms go on the back end and create that into what we call a cognitive fingerprint for success. And that becomes our success profile. And then when we have new candidates or the employees come in, they take their assessments. And then our algorithms run a bunch of regression to test to see how closely you match that. And the reason why we're using cognitive assessments in terms of general mental abilities is we're focusing on critical thinking, problem solving, conscientiousness, abstract reasoning, because those have been shown over time to be the best predictors of future job performance, as well as the ability to learn. And the ability to learn is super important these days, as we have to renew our skills, about 40% of our skills every 5 years. So that's key there. But we also have some assessments around values to make sure that we align with the values of the people, so that if they're in a job that matches your values, you're going to be willing to stay there longer. So we take all those things, we merge them into a profile of success, and then that's what we use. And then once you have that data, the assessment is how we gain the information, but then really what the platform's about is what do you do with that information afterwards? Did that help?
Sure. So what's the time commitment for both the workers who are profiled to build the quotient and then applicants, candidates who are measured against those?
About 40 minutes. Over time, we'll probably shorten it, but the fact of the matter is you get out of it what you put into it. And we want to make sure that we're creating a profile to understand the things like critical thinking, problem solving, abstract reasoning. You can't do that in a 90-second test. You can't do that effectively, even in a 10-minute test where you're going to get a full profile around all those things.
Have you done enough of them yet for a company's choices for their model employees to find false results, to maybe they aren't as perfect as they thought, or didn't have some of the attributes that you would hope for?
The fact is that we're creating a model of success of what's successful at your company. So if your top sales guys are knocking it out of the park, we're modeling that because that's what's working within your culture or your company, right? So it is personalized on that level in terms of, no, we haven't done enough data science to say, oh, how much do you vary between companies for that same role? But that will come in the future.
Sure. I wasn't thinking that as much, as sales are pretty easy to measure for the most part, but I don't know, some other type of worker that the
Finance
manager
people
thinks is a star, but the tests show otherwise, kind of thing.
but the tests aren't going to show otherwise. What shows otherwise is, right, is we will find more people who look like the people that you think rock, right? So the tests aren't going to show that they rock. The tests just show who they are, right? And it gives the profile. There's no, and that's one of the things that you have to, that people have to understand. This is just what's the profile of goodness at your organization.
Right.
And it's not going to say, oh, they're good or bad. It's just, this is what it looks like for people who are successful with you.
Sure.
And we'll find you more people who look like that.
And the other thing, just to point out, Greg, is that when you have an exemplar or the best in a role, as we saw in the demo, you could have 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, which creates a synthetic exemplar. Nobody's the best. You could see the exemplars all had scores of 97, 91, 89, 92. But you're measuring against a composite. But again, this is all based on what's best in your company, not what's best in a generic role.
David, Glennis, you guys have any questions? I appreciate talking to Greg too, but I just want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to ask questions.
Hi, Trevor. I guess my question is around how do you ensure that this is a non-biased assessment of the participants of the survey and your employees?
Sure. All of our assessments have actually been created and vetted. The Department of Labor originally created all of them, and they've gone through years of looking for adverse impact in the populations. So we started with that. These were all things that were pen and paper that we said we should digitize this and we should use it in a way that it hasn't been used before, which is what allowed us to put in a process patent for it. And we made sure that all the assessments that we're using don't show adverse impact. When you use it within the organization, I think what you're going to find out is that you might have a group of leaders that all might look and feel the same, but because smarts, I hate to boil it down to smarts is smarts, no matter who or what you are, you will find people who match that across the entire organization that would be different. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
It does.
Yeah. Sorry. So I actually like thinking it's a lot more fair of a way of doing things, because one of the things that people easily understand, if you don't have enough critical thinking or problem solving, you can't do a job. If you have too much of it, people also tend to get bored and quit or start pushing buttons that they shouldn't push. So what we're looking for is we're really looking for a real match across all of these different dimensions and trying to get you as close to that. And based on that, if you have a good cognitive fit, then chances are you can get trained into the role.
As Trevor said, I was just going to jump on that for 1 second. All of these tests have been validated with decades of research. These are not our assessments. These are things that have been decades of research with Department of Labor, and cognitive science has independently been seen as the best predictor of job success.
So one of the things that Jim mentioned, actually, I don't think we paid enough attention to before, was in GME. Our pilots, when we get up and running, we have the ability to, we can do feeds, we have APIs, but we can also do things through file uploads. So we get pilots up and running in 4 days, in 7 days. And so we're super quick about getting that up, running, and launched. A lot of the delay sometimes is getting the people on the client side to sit down long enough to take their assessments so we can build out that profile. But I thought that was just something that was worthwhile talking about for a second or two.
It is, Trevor. The average deployment cycle is typically anywhere from 60 to 90 days. So that is significantly differential to the norm, with especially considering something that's so valuable so quickly in context of where and how clients are already using HR technology. It plugs in, accelerates, optimizes, and de-risks the systems and infrastructure you have already invested heavily in. It's huge.
Thanks. I'd like to think so. David, can I answer any of your questions? Greg, Glennis, anything more? If not, I will give you back some of your time in your day. I'd say thank you for spending an afternoon with us. I truly appreciate it. If you have any other questions, you could reach out to me or Jeremy or Jim. We're on LinkedIn. I will have this recording cleaned up and edited, and I'll send you guys a copy of it, and it'll be available out on our website too. Any questions? Feel free to ask. Greg?
Thank you guys for doing it. Appreciate the info, and good to see you as always.
Thanks for attending, Greg.
Nice
Good
to
see
meet you, Jeremy.
Yes, likewise. Thank you, Greg. And thank you, Glennis and David.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Good afternoon, guys.
Cheers,
See you
everyone.
guys.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.